Good morning. We take a look now at Grand Rapids, Michigan, where many of you have been following the story of Patrick Lyoya. He was fatally shot by an officer during a traffic stop on April 4th. And since then, there have, of course, been tons of conversations about this incident. Ben, Dr. Brother Mack, if you are still with us, uh, this situation is interesting. When it happened, I talked about it during my audition at WCCO Radio, which is one of the biggest radio stations in the state of Minnesota, but also it's predominantly white,
Yeah.
older white men, conservative, Republican, and of course, the phone lines lit up, the text lines lit up. But I was also surprised that even after that segment, I received a call from a friend out of North Carolina who's a Black man, who's a pastor. And even he said that this was a situation he was struggling to understand. And, I think for me, being in Minneapolis, the epicenter of this global movement for police accountability, it's very clear to me why people are concerned about this incident, why people think that it's injustice, why people are taking to the streets and demanding that the cop is fired. But for other folks who maybe haven't followed issues on police accountability, they might not quite get it. And so I want to open up, comments from viewers and hear your thoughts. If you are in YouTube or Twitch, there is a link in the comments where you can call in. But Ben and Brother Mac, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll say this quick first. You know, in the situation with Patrick Lyoya, their number one was a language barrier because he's not from here. His family moved here to pursue the American dream.
Yeah.
But his native language was Swahili, and you could hear that in that initial conversation with the cop, where he was asking him why he was stopped, and the cop was like, "Do you even speak English?"
Mm.
And at the moment when he ran, I think for a lot of people, that's where they feel like the officer was justified in using force. But this is a man who at this time has not been convicted of any, crime. There's only accusations there. And on top of that, I don't think Michigan has a death penalty. He wasn't armed. And to see a black man, an unarmed black man, be shot, executed, in the back of his head is extremely problematic. But I'm curious to know if you guys have watched the footage and what your thoughts are about it.
Well, Georgia, personally, I haven't watched it, so I'd certainly like to watch it to get a better understanding because I want to understand the brother from North Carolina why he's struggling with it. So I apologize for not being up on this particular incident, but uh, or if you can give details of even more details of what happened.
Well, yeah, so the cop pulls him over and says that his license plate doesn't match his car. And so the cop gets out of his car. Patrick gets out of his car. And the cop is like, get back in the car. Let me see your ID. And Patrick's like, why, what did I do? Why'd you pull me over? What did I do? Why'd you pull me over? And then Patrick, after he's asked for his ID, turns to, it sounds like, an individual in the car with him and asks for his wallet. And in the process of waiting for him to get his wallet, Patrick takes off running. And the cop ends up, tussling with him. Um, from the footage I've seen, it doesn't look like Patrick was violent in terms of striking the officer, kicking the officer, punching the officer, but you could tell he was actively trying to get away from the cop. He was running. He was, I guess people would, consider that resisting arrest, but I don't think he was assaulting
Mhm.
during this tussle, which lasted about 2 or 3, not more. Um, During this tussle, the cop disarms his taser, and then you can hear the cop saying, "Don't reach for the taser. Stop reaching for the taser." So there's also a question there on whether or not a taser can be disarmed more than one time, and if there was a threat of the cop being tased, which also they are trained for and is not lethal force, even if he did get his hands on the taser. And then shortly after he yells those remarks, the cop's body camera actually deactivates. And so the only thing we can see after that is from cell phone footage from the person who Patrick asked to hand him his wallet. And this brother was so scared, his cell phone was going like it was pointing at the cop. And then it almost was like he was in trouble because he would put it down like he was scared and then he'd put it back up. So you can kind of make out what happened after that. But shortly after the cop yelled, "Don't grab my taser," he shoots Patrick in the back of the head. And then after that, we do not see him render aid. We see him take several steps back, kind of processing what he had just done. And I think for the folks who I've talked to, who have said that, they don't understand this situation, they're looking at, okay, Patrick ran. He was resisting arrest. What do you expect an officer to do? And here's my thing. Okay, look, we get into a real muddy place if we start saying that cops get to be the jury, judge, and executioner in states that don't even have the death penalty. We have a social contract that we have agreed that our process in America is if your license plate don't match your car and you stole and it ends up being proven that you stole the car, you're going to go to jail. You're going to get a ticket. You're going to get charged with a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor or a felony. You're going to do your time, right? But you're going to live to see another day. And so what's scary to me is that you have people like, well, this individual should comply. Yeah, yes, and you tell me if it's a gross misdemeanor or a felony to run from the police. Because if you run from the police, if that man's wallet is in the car, you can go get his ID. There's another
We have a
individual in the
caller.
car who can ID him. That you don't have to hunt him down and put neighbors. This was in a residential area. This man was executed in someone's lawn. Okay. So you're putting other people in danger. You're traumatizing other people over a stolen vehicle or an alleged stolen vehicle because it hasn't even been proven yet. And so it just to me is extremely problematic when you think of people who are defending these killings when that is not what we agreed to as a society.
So Georgia, you said this incident happened on April 4th, and as of this day, they can't tell us the status of the vehicle.
I haven't received those updates. And I will say, I'm not sure if they've come out yet. It obviously I'm in Minnesota, so it can be challenging to get some of those nuanced details when you're not local on the ground. Um, I definitely will look into it, but the last that I checked and the sources that I have that are there, that information hasn't come out to my knowledge.
So here's my take on what you've just described to me. Um, no matter how you cut it, it's a traffic violation. Is that worthy of death? And so your point is salient. Are you now wanting to play judge, jury, and executioner? Now let's go to the situation of him running. As a black man, given what we have seen, especially over the past 5 years, I can absolutely understand that fear. I can absolutely understand. I've seen video footage of people who the cops pull up behind them, and instead of stopping on some isolated road, they will keep driving until they get to some place where there's witnesses around. I absolutely understand that. So if he were to take off the run, it's as though nobody understands what we as a people particularly have gone through. So when you take a look at Philando Castile, uh, Alton Sterling, George Floyd, I mean, just go down the list, and you can't understand why we're fearful when we are stopped by law enforcement. No one can seem to understand that. And then if I'm asking you, why did you pull me over? And I can't get a salient answer to that, a quick answer to that right away as to why you pulled me over. I'm just saying, I may not agree with him running, but I certainly understand it. And I'm
Yeah.
certainly not saying, to the point that it's troubling to me. So in the case of the pastor from North Carolina, I'm not wrestling with this situation. This absolutely should not have happened. And there should be understanding within law enforcement as to why we are the way we are, why we feel the way we feel with them. If we appear jitterish, they've given us every reason to appear jitterish. So
Yeah.
I'm certainly not troubled by it at all. But I would think that if this situation happened on April 4th, to prevent or in the area of transparency, you would have thought that at a minimum they would have already come out and give us some status of the car and why the vehicle was stopped. So
Yeah.
given that nothing has come out, so what happens if the plates were simply expired, the car isn't stolen? Now you got to look at the fact that a life was taken. This is Sandra Bland as a man all over again. It's just reckless. It makes no sense, and it's infuriating, and it simply adds to the discontent and disdain that we have for law enforcement.
Absolutely. Well, and it sounds like we do have a caller who is with us. Please go ahead and state your name and share with us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, this is Tyler Hackner.
Hey, Tyler.
Hey, to be honest, I feel like it doesn't really matter if we comply or not. It doesn't matter if we're like not resisting or whatever. They'll always find a reason to shoot us. They'll always find a reason to brutalize us. That's really my thoughts on that.
And Georgia, to Tyler's point, I think we all remember the video footage of the cop stopping a brother at a convenience store, and he asked him for his wallet. He reaches for his wallet, and the cop shoots him. And the guy says, "Why'd you shoot me?" He said, "Well, you was reaching." He said, "I was getting my wallet. You just asked me to get my wallet." So to Tyler's point, we comply, there's a problem. We take a knee, there's a problem. We stand, there's a problem. We don't say anything, there's a problem. The fact is, we black, and that's their problem.
That's right. That's right. Even I think about Philando Castile, who disclosed to the officer,
Absolutely.
hey, I'm an armed licensed gun carrier,
Right.
and the cop said, okay, get your ID,
Right.
and he reaches for ID, and the cop shoots him and kills him,
Insane.
and he complied.
Insane.
And so for those people, this rhetoric, and I think it's time for and it's not just white people that have this ideology that we're the problem, that regardless of what we do, we deserved it. But it's black people too, you know and depending on to your relationship to law enforcement. I know people who are black and blue, or who have relatives who are black that are on departments across the country, and that can influence how people think about this. But there is common ground regardless of where your analysis is on this situation. The common ground is, I would hope, is that nobody really wants to see people getting killed by police. But then if you don't want to see people getting killed by police, what are you going to do about it? What is the solution? Because sitting behind your computer and typing comply, comply, comply every time that there's a grieving family in this country is not helping.
Georgia, do you remember this situation? And I think it was New Jersey, where this carload of kids from an Ivy League school got pulled over by a state trooper for speeding. And this woman who was a commissioner, the mother of one of the daughters, got out the car. And the whole time that she's talking to them, they got the body cams rolling, the dash cams rolling. And she is literally giving them the business about, do you know who I am? Cursing them up one side and down the other. And all I could do for as long as I watched that tape was try to imagine that had been a black woman or a black man speaking to those officers in that manner. And they stayed just as calm as all get out. Now, and ultimately what ended up happening, I think she lost her position because clearly she was trying to flex
Right.
and use her privilege of position to get her daughter off for this. But the point that was most incredibly made was now try to imagine, it was as poignant as what we saw on January 6th. If we can all go inside of our minds and say, what if those were black folks storming the Capitol? There would have been bullets flying, bloodshed at every cost. And it's the same there. So going back to what Tyler said, it's like no matter what we do, this is the racial bias that they bring into it. And so as long as we have this type of behavior, we're going to have this disdain for that profession. And the thing that I find, and I had a friend of mine who is an attorney in Brother James Bible, and he just dealt with the case up in Tacoma, Manny Ellis, and he ended up getting a settlement for the Manny, for the Ellis family. And that case was very reminiscent of what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, very reminiscent. The shooting takes place, and it was a while before they even reported on it. But he ends up getting a settlement. But one of the things that he and I were talking about as recently as yesterday is the difference, when we talk about black and blue. He said one of the things that law enforcement is now trying to do is rid law enforcement of black women, because more likely than not, black women are not going to sit there and allow this type of behavior. They will speak up and say something, whereas black men in blue seem to just want to go along and try to be a part of the brotherhood. And I've known very few male officers. I do know one in particular, but I've known very few male officers who show the moxie of a black woman that's in blue. And so but there's nothing that's debatable about what took place here on April 4th. There's no rhyme or reason as to why he gets stopped for a minor traffic. Now, you open that car and you see a carload full of guns. Okay, maybe I'm understanding something now. He pulls out, he's got a weapon. Maybe I'm understanding something. As that situation played out the way you described it, absolutely criminal what that thug pig did.
Absolutely. And I'm curious to know, we have another caller. If you can, as you join us, please state your name, where you're calling from, and your thoughts on the matter. And I'm curious to know, we have another caller. If you can, there's an echo there. I'm not sure if you can turn down your computer volume. And your thoughts. I'm curious to know, we have another caller. If you can.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. I'm not sure if you can turn down your computer volume.
Is that better?
Yep, there you go. Good morning.
Can you hear me, guys?
Struth, can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Oh, hi. I'm Ruth. I'm calling from Australia.
Oh, well, thank you so much for calling.
Sorry?
Thank you so much for calling. If you can state your name and your thoughts on the matter.
I just wanted to say that here in Australia, we have something.
Thank you so much for calling. If you can state your name and your thoughts on the matter.
I just wanted to say that here in Australia, we have something.
I think we may have some technical difficulties there. Not sure if we can get that worked out, but definitely honored that folks are calling in from Australia, and would be curious, even if we can't get you back on, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, because, Brother Mack, when you think about these issues too, and I was really curious to hear from another country what the perspective is, because every country has their own laws, their own mandates, and some countries have better de-escalation policies and practices. It looks like we have you back with us. If you want to go ahead and state your thoughts. Or they dropped off again.
Well, Georgia, the other thing that, when you compare what happens here in America to other nations, part of what makes our situation just so absolutely horrific is just the fact that we have no common sense when it comes to gun legislation, gun laws.
That's
We're,
right.
we're probably one of the most armed countries in the world. And so it shouldn't be surprising that we see this type of behavior. Now, as it applies to Black folk, clearly the original sin of this nation is still bearing witness in the types of tragic situations that we're seeing now. So when you add that original sin being carried over and the lack of accountability and the lack of empathy from most of white America, this is why we have what we have right now.
Yeah. Well, let's try to see if we can get this other caller. If you're with us here, state your name and your thoughts on the matter. Nope, just doesn't want to work this morning. That's okay. Well, Brother Mac, I know we are on the clock here. We are wrapping up with just a few minutes left. When it comes to the Patrick Lyoya case, we're going to continue to follow this as we followed a lot of other incidences as well. We're ramping up here in Minneapolis for the trial of the other
Hello.
3 officers who are charged in the death of George Floyd. That is scheduled to start in June. They still haven't stated whether or not they're going to allow cameras in the
We have
courtroom.
Jan, Georgia.
What was that?
We have Jan.
Jan,
Hello.
hey, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm calling from Berlin.
Well, thank you so much for calling this morning. What are your thoughts on the Patrick Lyoya case?
It's just unbelievable for me again and over again and over and over and over again to watch this stuff. We also have police violence in Germany, but our main point is that they are just not allowed to be this loose with shooting people. So when they kill people here, it's more when they already are arrested and then something happens in jail.
Mm.
But this just open killing of people is really, really scary, I must say.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. In your country, do you think that there are better de-escalation tactics?
Mm.
Because what people here are saying about these incidences is that it's the fault of the person that the police are interacting with, that they don't comply or they're being aggressive. And so I'm just curious if cops where you're from in your country have to deal with people who might not comply as well. And, do they de-escalate?
Mm.
How did they prevent it from getting to the point where they're using fatal force?
The main point is that in our law is they are just not allowed to pull the gun and use the gun without any really, really good excuse. They are more or less forced to de-escalate or just use non-fatal violence. Yeah, I also got on protests against Nazis and stuff already. A lot of just bad contact with the police, I would say. It's not that they are much better in de-escalating. The main point is really that they are just not allowed to shoot as fast or anyway. They
Mm,
use violence all the time. They use violence, especially about people who are looking like they are not German, whatever this means in the
wow.
end. So people of color in general, refugees and so on. We have a big problem with the Berlin police with just treating everyone who's not visible German as shit. That's just true. But they have just not the law in their back like this is in America. Uh, we have not learned much after World War II, I must say, when it comes to authorities, but at least we have this lesson learned that police shouldn't be allowed to be a state in the state, like it is in
Absolutely.
America in the end.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your call this morning. We appreciate you being with us all the way from Berlin. Brother Mac, it's always a pleasure. We want to
Thank
encourage
you.
you
Sorry.
guys to, if you didn't get to make it to call in, leave your thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation we must have. Stick around for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.